Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I've got a fun project today. It's a good beginner project. We're going to take that beginner project and just put a slight twist on it. It's going to look a lot more advanced, but really, if you follow along, you'll be able to accomplish this in an afternoon as well. Let's go here on the workbench and take a look at it, but I appreciate you taking time to be with me in the shop today. Okay, so here's the pattern. I've had this pattern for I don't know, 2, maybe going on 3 years. And it was easy enough to develop the pattern for myself. But if you didn't want to go through the trouble, you can find them and order the pattern as well. And a lot of times I think I've seen them where they're even, in different sizes. But once I developed this pattern here, I've made smaller ones and larger ones and used the exact same pattern. And if I wanted to, say, make one for this utility knife here, and if I wanted to go in there another inch, just needs to be an inch longer, all I would do is I would trace the top half, and then I would shift it down an inch, and then trace the bottom half. That would allow you to, make it custom size. And if you wanted to come in some, you can kind of free form that. That's kind of more my style of, developing a pattern. So the lady that ordered this ordered a blue diamond back belt for her husband. That's the belt here that I'm working on. It's not totally finished, but we're just about there. And I'm going to make this sheath to match that. And I'm going to end up using these diamond stamps on the face of it here. And I'm going to use the same blue leather that I purchased from Montana Leather. I purchased this hide of, I believe it's about 9 ounces. And I purchased this in Prescott this last February, and I've used it for a few different projects. And I also have a piece here of a lighter weight leather. Now, if I was going to make this nice sheath and I wasn't going to tool that pattern on there, I would use the heavier weight for the back and this lighter weight for the front. I find that in doing that, then I get all of the forming to the knife in the face of it, and you're not pushing into the back side of it. But when I'm going to tool it, that lighter weight leather I don't think is as suitable. It will take the tooling, but it's going to stretch enough that I'm afraid we'll lose that pattern. So, so this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this leather from Montana Leather. It's the blue and the vaqueta leather. And so the next thing I need to say is I've kind of gone back and forth on whether I want the back side of my sheath to be the nice finished side of the leather, or if I would prefer to have that nice finished part here where it's exposed behind this front piece. Well, today I'm going to make it with the smooth side on both sides. And this area here where the rough side of the leather is going to be exposed, I'll seal that and slick that down with some Resin so that it has a finished look there too. So, like I said, you can go both ways on that. This is the way I'm going to make this one here. Now, so the next thing I need to do is I need to trace that out. So if I want the finished side on this back to be on the back, I need to flip this over in reverse and trace that on here. So I'll do that. And I'm just going to trace around here. There you can see my outline. And I'm going to trace the front. And I'm coming over here because I think I like this leather here a little bit nicer than this other side. And that's going to be on the back, so it's, not as big a deal. And I'm probably just being too particular. It is a natural organic product here. And, it's going to have its own characteristics. The other thing that happens is that where I do the tooling, if you had some scars in there or such, typically the tooling is going to hide that. And I'm going to trace this out, and I'm going to stay probably an 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch outside of my line here. And I will do that final trimming on that when I get the 2 layers of the sheath layered up. only place that that doesn't really work out is here, where this will sit on top of the back. This part from here to here, it's easier to get that completely finished. All right, so here's our pattern here. So that means that this part here is going to be the area that's going to be exposed here. And I've had these before where you start turning them and you're like, get a little bit lost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift this down and I'm going to put a little pencil line here to help me remember where I need to slick down. And you're not going to see that because it's going to be, I shifted it down, so that's a, 3/8 of an inch behind there. And just so I don't forget, I'll go ahead and this area from here to here, I'll go ahead and do my rounding over with my Ron's tool number 3 here. And on the inside, I just need to do it for the area here that's going to be exposed. And this will help. I created these marks here. That's where the stitch lines goes from here to here on both sides. So I just need to finish between those two areas on the back here. And I'll go ahead and burnish this while I'm at it. And in that same area, that's the only place I need to burnish. Matter of fact, I don't like to go further than that because where it's going to be attached to the other, I don't want that rounded. I want from there all the way around to look like on the edge it's one piece of leather. This vaqueta leather really gets a nice burnish pretty easily there. That was only water and just a few moments with the burnish on there. So I can set this aside now. The next thing I need to do is to lay out my tooling pattern here in the middle. And I think the easiest way to do that is to first identify my stitch lines, because I want the tooling to be centered between those stitch lines. So I'm just going to put a little mark here. And it's easy enough. If you wanted this is going to be a right hand sheath. If you wanted a left hand, you would just reverse this and you would reverse the back as well, and that would give you what you're looking for a left hand draw. So I've got these lines here, and I'm going to just very carefully put a light pencil mark between them. I could probably find a way to do it without a mark here, but these pencil lines are easy enough to erase as long as I don't bear down and put a big groove in there. And even then, if I end up stitching over those, you probably wouldn't even see that either. All right, so now let's see what our space is between those. It's 2 1/4, so 1 1/8 is the center. So the 1 1/8, this is 1 inch. I just moved it over a 1/8 of an inch here, and I'll put my little line here. And I used my awl for that because I don't want a pencil line in my tooling. The next thing I need to do, I'm probably getting particular here, but this stamp is 1/2 of an inch from tip to tip. And so I'm going to measure here. I'll probably have something like 3/8 of an inch in the top and the bottom. So still, I just need to find the center since I'm going to have a 3/8 on both. So the length of this is along that scribe line, just under 4 inches here. So 2 inches would be the center, and a quarter short of that would be where that tooling goes to. And I've tooled this particular pattern without adding moisture to it, but I think it gives you a little bit more definition when you add the moisture to it. So let me add a little bit of moisture here. Well, adding that moisture just got rid of most of my line. Let me put it back on there again. As long as the line is within the area tooled, the tooling will hide that. There's our first diamond. So I'm just going to follow that pattern. The first tip here at the end of the last one, and then the other side on the line. Okay, I'll finish that in just a second, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and I like to work on this away side. So I'm going to put my mark on. So I'll put my stamp on here. There's a point here, and I'm lining that up between these two long end points. Let me move my light a little bit. Maybe this will help both of us. I'll put this crease here between these two long points, and then I'm just visually making sure that these two tips end up on the other side of the existing marks, and I'll stamp it on there. Okay, so now we've got these first two rows, the center and the one to the right. Typically then, I'll finish out this side here, but I want to show you. I'm going to come around here to this other side, and I'll go ahead and put these 4 marks in, and then we'll come back and look at it here. Okay. Now, I said I wanted to continue on here, but what I'm going to do to help me with that is I'm going to go ahead and put this spot here on here. And now, when I put this up here, I've got something to help give me a little bit of guidance into keeping it straight. And I can eyeball up the line as well. All right. The other thing I could have done is I could have measured to make sure that my pattern came out right, because I started with the first diamond being dead center in this sheath. You could do it to where the points were the dead center, and you work out from there. So I guess you can figure out what works best for your particular one. So now I have the center row and the outside, next outside on both of those. I need to finish off this tip down here. I'm going to do it the same way. Almost turns the wrong way. All right, so we have our center now. So I'm going to go ahead, on my belts, the pattern is 5 rows wide. I'm 3, I'll soon be 4 patterns wide here. All right, so I'll add my 5th one, and then I'll be back centered again, and I'm going to look at it and see. I may add 2 more for the size of this sheath. Let me look at it here when I get done. Okay, so there's our pattern. I don't know, it's kind of hard to see. It's dark on here. My 2 stitch lines and my pattern is finished there. So that's the same as on the belt. I'm really considering staying with that. Part of the reason why is I'm not going to be coming up any further here on this tip area, so I'm just going to be coming out here and down. You got to really think about that. Stitch lines here. You know what? The worst I could do is not like it and start over. Let me add 1 more row on both sides, and then we'll come back when I have that done. Well, there we go. I'm kind of fighting the temptation to bring this out, but I have to stop somewhere, and the reason why I say I have to stop somewhere is if I put these 3 on, then 2 more, then 1, I'm going to be all the way over here on this stitch line. And then I realize it's a diamond of diamonds, which isn't, I don't think, a bad look, but then I don't know that it matches the belt as well as this does. So I'm going to stop with this pattern here. All right, so keep in mind the outside's not its finished shape. But the next thing I want to do before I forget, well, there's 2 things. The first one is I want to put my maker's mark on there, because if I layer this up, turn it over, and I do my maker's mark there, I'm gonna mash and destroy some of my diamonds, and I don't want to do that. So let me put that on there. One reason why I made my maker's mark round, and you may want to consider this if you're doing your own, is if it was square and you put it on here, if it doesn't line up with stitch lines, I think it would look funny turned. On mine, with it being round, on purpose, I actually a lot of times will rotate it from what I think looks straight, because by the time I get this glued on and my stitch lines on here, it could be tipped slightly. And I think if it's tipped slightly, that looks like an accident. But if I turn it, somewhere around like a quarter turn, then I believe that looks done on purpose. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put resin here, and I'm going to use my slicker and burnish this down. Now while this is drying here, where I slicked it down, I'm going to go ahead and continue on with my next steps here. What I want to make sure is I don't want to change my rounding of this too much here, and if I push this up, then I will be. So I'm going to make sure I'm down far enough here on both of these, and I will put my marks here. So this is my stitching lines here. If you remember, I located those. I'm going to use this same one here, pushing this down. Now the reason why this is important is this is going to denote where my contact adhesive goes. And then obviously a 1/4 inch or so on the bottom. Same with this, but obviously I'm not putting contact adhesive there, so I'll flip this over and put this on here, and I'll make sure that I'm lined up with my pencil lines, top and bottom, so I don't have it rotated funny. Burnish edge here, so this is the bottom. All right, let's apply my contact adhesive. Once I get this on here, I'm trying to keep an eye on this line here. This is the front. It's going to be on here, so I don't want to get glue above those lines where it may not be hidden. So I'll be careful here. Once the contact adhesive, this first coat, is set up, I'll come back, put a second coat on. So I'll go ahead and finish up applying this first coat. I'll let it set. Usually doesn't take that long, about in where we live, about 5 minutes. We don't have much humidity, so this really sets up pretty quick. And then once we're done with that, then I'll be right back. All right, so our contact adhesive is tacky but not wet. And I get one shot at this. I just say that as a reminder to me more than anybody else. So what I want to do, I said earlier, I don't want to be taking away too much here in that roundness. This area here I can shape however I want, and obviously all of this is still open for negotiation. So I think the thing to do is to line up kind of down here at the bottom. And obviously my trim line is over here on that. Okay. Not going anywhere now. Now, I've got area here to trim, obviously. And the one thing that I've done before that caused me some issues is I've gone ahead and punched my hole here for the belt loop, and then I'm somewhat stuck. And I'll show you what I mean. I think the next best thing to do here, or the next step in the process, is to establish this stitch line. I mean, it's already established, but I'm going to install that stitch line now. So I think for me, the next step in the process here is to establish this straight stitch line on both sides. And I'll show you the reason why I'm saying that. And the other thing I want to do is this top line here, at least from here to here, I've already established that on this front piece. And my first stitch, I'm going to start a 1/4 inch. I want a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's 1/4 inch this direction. Just like that. The reason why that's important to me is I want both of these to be the same. Let me measure my 1/4 inch here. And I use the term still for negotiation. When we get down here to the bottom, it's same thing. It's still, I mean, I know generally where I want it. I want to be 1/4 inch in from this line here. But if my last stitch comes out down here and I'm a 1/16 inch short of that, then I'll just move my line up to there. Okay. So I've established both of these. I just carried this through and I stopped where it makes sense to stop. And what I mean by that is I want a 1/4 inch from the outside edge to my stitch line. And I'm pretty close to that 1/4 inch. I might be a little bit less. So I'll probably come outside this pencil line slightly to get the correct seam allowance there. But on this part of it, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to a line off of here. I want my bag punch to be parallel with this, and I want the belt to fit in here on the top of it. I don't want, in other words, I don't want my bag punch down here and have this sticking above the belt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, maybe I'll make it a little easier to see here. I'm going to lay in my 1/4 inch. I'll create a little line here to give us an idea of what that looks like. 1/4 inch from the top is going to be here and here. And since I've got a 1/4 inch on the outside to the stitch line, I think it makes sense to have a 1/4 inch to my bag punch line and a 1/4 inch to there. So I'm going to actually work out from that. Let me put a light mark here where that's going to be. That seems like a little bit much. I'm going to come in 3/16 instead of 1/4. If I pull it out from underneath the camera, I can kind of get a good strike on it instead of working underneath here. Okay. And now when I feed my belt through this, it's going to have plenty of room. I wanted to show you that. That's the reason why I use this 2-inch. I may have said 2.5. It's a 2-inch bag punch, 1.5-inch belt, but when it's set at an angle, it fits this correctly. Then I have established that. This is going to be where my stitch line is going to be on the other side. Stitch line. I'm saying that just as much for me as for you. So if that's the stitch line, then I need, if you remember, I wanted a 1/4 inch outside of that for my allowance. And I'm going to take now this round here. You have to figure out where it makes sense to go from here to there. If you come around to here, then it's got that funny bump in it. So it's really, if you come straight off of this corner, it makes sense there to me. So there's that line there. So I'll come around here and stitch down to there. I'll come around this one and do the same, stitch down to here, like that. And then up here at the top, and you can fine tune your stitch line once you get your scribe on here. And what I mean by that is I'm able to, I can cheat it in or out slightly with the stitching chisel when I come around there. I'm going to continue this line off the edge here, or close to it. And I think then that'll help me define where this goes. Okay. Quarter inch. You see here, now I'm a little skinny of that 1/4 inch, so I've got a choice. I can bring that stitch line over some, or I can narrow up the seam allowance on it here, and I'm probably going to maybe split the difference. All right. I'm going to stay outside of my line slightly here. I'll sand to it. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in my stitched line here, finish establishing that. Now, as I go to put this in here, I can see that I'm not going to have the right spacing to this hole here. And in my opinion, when you look at this, you're going to notice the roundness or lack thereof at the top, and you're going to notice these two intersections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go the other way here, and I think I'm going to back up 2, and then I'll space it in here. I think that makes sense. These stitches come out perfect that way, and then I was able to adjust them here. And I think since you're coming around this hole, you're turning straight there. I think that if it's off slightly there, most people aren't going to notice that. Okay. The last one here, I can set on here and see how it looks. If I need to, I could always bring this out or bring it in a little bit, change that radius slightly for the spacing, but I think it worked out pretty good here. All right. I'm going to take it over on the sander and get this done because it looks a little wonky until I get it shaped in there. Yes, another technical term, wonky. And once I get it sanded to where I like the distance from the inside of here to the stitch, the same out to here, around here, then I'll go ahead and set up and do the stitching on here. If you're going to do like white stitching, I would put Resin on and then stitch it so your stitches stay clean, but the belt has black stitching, so we'll be using black stitching on this. It gets a little bit of a flange here that will get trimmed off, so I have to kind of take that into account. And then this squishes in. I guess you could make an argument for doing the sanding before you punch the bag punch hole, but for my way of laying it out, that doesn't make sense for me. Here's a workaround. I'll stick that back in there. I'm just kind of eyeballing, sculpting here what makes sense. There's no hard, fast rule, other than if it doesn't look right, it doesn't matter how it measures, because if it doesn't look right, it's not right. Okay, so we're ready now to do our stitching. And I'll do this final edging when I'm done with the stitching. There's a couple reasons why. One, probably not going to happen on this thick of a leather, but on the edge of a belt, sometimes when you tighten these down, you may create some pucker, and it'll make little scallops in the edge if you do that. So I typically cut my edge after I get my stitching done. The other thing I want to mention is, once again, these two spots here are going to be, I think, what's going to catch the eye when they look at that. If your stitching pattern is wonky there, it's going to show. So we want to make sure we do that correct. The other thing I want to do is I want to start in one place and work all the way through and end in another place so that I only have one finish on here. And I'll do that on the back and it won't be quite so noticeable. The other thing to take into consideration are these two corners here where you're pushing the knife into here, these are going to be the highest stressed areas, so I don't want to start her in there. So I like to stitch back towards me, and to me the easiest place to start, I'm looking at this, is going to be, I think, here, because then if I stitch here back towards myself, I can rotate this and be back towards myself, and I've got plenty of meat to hold on to. If I started in this spot on my stitching, then when I get around to here and I'm stitching back towards myself, I'm just holding on this little bitty edge. Anyway, once again, I don't know. Maybe people get driven crazy by hearing the method for my madness, but that's the way I do it, and that's why I do it that way. So I'm going to start right here. The other thing I'm going to do is I start on this, what looks like on the outer edge, because then I don't have to close that gap up when I come around here. Typically on a belt, 3.5, 4 times length is enough. My belts are typically 12 ounces on the thick side, and this is 19 ounces. So I went with 5 times the length of the stitch line in thread. Tigeritza 0.08 in black. That's the same thread that I use when I'm creating belts, unless there's some, small pattern that I'm working with that I need to have something different. But I think the 0.08 with this 5mm stitching pattern, in my opinion, it looks right. Just a traditional saddle stitch. I had someone ask me or make comment that I do my saddle stitch differently, and I suppose that's possible. I've seen a lot of people do, where they have only one needle in the hole at a time. This seems to work good for me. It's where I seem to get my, fastest pattern from, and I like the overall effect, the look of the stitch. So that's why I do it this way. I'll finish up my stitching, and I'll come back when we're ready to finish up on this opposite side over here. All right, let's go over here and get this extra string that I wasted taken care of. So I came through on the back. I'm going to clip these off with my thread zapper, and I'm going to go about 1/16 of an inch long, and then I'll melt that down and meld it in with the other thread there, and that locks that in place. And now I'm going to use my number 4 Ron's edger and clean up these edges here. This part here I'm not going to use the 4 on, that would be too much. You can see how narrow that looks compared to here once it's been rounded, and part of that is that bag punch does make a taper. It doesn't make a complete vertical when you get into thick leather like this. And I'm going to use a tool to help define the burnish on these areas here. The next thing, though, I need to do is on my belts. Now, you don't have to do this if you like the blue the way it is, but the belt that they ordered has a black antique on it. It helps define the diamonds, and it tones down the blue just slightly here. So let me get out my antiquing. If you wanted to antique tooling, but you didn't want to affect the color of the blue as much, you could put a coat of resist like Tan Coat or other brands on there before doing the antiquing, and then it will typically only get caught in the the tooling areas. But as I said, the blue is a little bit bright. Well, I shouldn't say that. It isn't what the person ordered. The person saw the blue belt that I did that has the black antiquing on it, and that's what they wanted. So we're just giving them that. It's really a pretty blue. I just used antiquing the first time around to create more definition in the tooling, and then that's what the person saw and wanted. There we go. The diamonds really stand out more. I'm going to let this dry for an hour or two, and then we'll be back. I'll do edge work on this, and we'll get resin on it, and shoot, we're going to be pretty much done at that point. The antique finish has dried, and the next step is to get a burnish on these edges. Once I have a burnish on here, we'll put a coat of resin. That's what I like on these. You can use Tan Coat probably on this, or whatever your favorite clear is. I guess maybe sometimes I'm overly concerned about the dye rubbing off on clothes. I guess predominantly it's blue, so if the person wore blue jeans all the time, probably wouldn't be that big a deal, but I guess I'm always overly concerned about color rub off. So I use resin, and I like how that seals it. And on this diamond finish, it actually really helps to highlight the pattern. So I'll work a little bit here on the edges, inside these holes here as well. And then I'll be back here just shortly, and we'll be ready to put a coat of resin on here. Okay, so I let the burnish dry. Probably don't have to. The sealer is a water reducible sealer, but I just feel like it's better to give it a proper amount of time. When you're putting the resin on here, I really think it's best to work with it until it's pretty even as far as how much has been absorbed. Get rid of any streakiness, any bubbles. If you leave bubbles on the surface, if I left it like that, you would see that when it dried. So I tend to just kind of keep working with it, catching the edges, even it out until all those bubbles are gone. And if you have to, sometimes I will flip over to the back side. It doesn't have as much on it, and you can wipe it that way. Or I will just put the sponge down and work it with my hands until it's even. It's usually pretty easy on something as small as this. We'll let this dry, and then we'll come back here and should be about ready to finish up. I may put one more coat on it after it's dry, but I'll come back when we're ready to wrap up here. Well, there we go. I think it turned out pretty good. Let's turn the camera around here and we will wrap up. Well, there you go. Another project finished up here today. This is the pancake sheath for, I would just call it a large pocket knife. And it's in the blue diamondback pattern. It matches the belt that the lady ordered for her husband. And now he has a match set. I think it turned out really pretty nice. Made from vegetable tan leather, pre-dyed in blue from Montana Leather. I appreciate you following along today. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I hope you're having a great day.